Okay, everyone. So I'm now gonna give a little bit of a talk, just something to help to guide you in your meditation practice, but also to guide you in your spiritual life in general. Just one of these core ideas of Buddhism. And today I thought I would talk about the idea of contentment. Contentment, santuti, in the Pali language. Maybe you have the same word in Sinhala, I don't know. I don't really know very much Sinhala, so that's unfortunate. But the idea of santuti is probably very familiar to you. And when you hear many meditation masters, people like Ajahn Brahm, for example, when he teaches meditation, he puts a lot of emphasis on the idea of santuti or contentment. And of course, the reason for that is very obvious, because if you are really content, it means that you don't want to be anywhere else. You don't want to do anything else. Your mind is not inclining towards anything else. And because your mind isn't inclining towards anything else, it means that you just want to be here. You want to be mindful. You're not thinking about, you're not kind of allowing the mind to be run around by desires and all of these kind of things. So contentment is a very powerful tool that gives rise to meditation. And so all meditation masters will really tend to emphasize these kind of qualities. But not only does it help with meditation practice, contentment is also very useful in daily life, in your ordinary life. If you are a contented person, it means that your ordinary life tends to be very easy, very relaxed. You're not always running around, allowing yourself to be pushed by all the things of the world, but you are contented with what you have. You're contented with your situation, and you're not always striving for more, striving for new things in life. But you understand that the idea of contentment is profound and very important even to have a good life. Actually, it is incredibly important. And so this is kind of the background for contentment. And it is a word, santuti, it is a word that occurs in many places in the suttas. And you will find that contentment sometimes, when you look at the gradual training, the Pubbā Sikka. In the Pubbā Sikka, you find that contentment is found sometimes quite early in that training. After just ordinary morality, you have the training in contentment. Sometimes it is found further down on the path, just before you do your meditation practice. And sometimes it is found at the very end of the path. The result of the path, becoming an arahant, becoming an enlightened being, also leads to maximum kind of contentment. So there's something that follows you all the way along the path. And this is true of all these beautiful qualities that we develop on the Buddhist path. We start off by trying to cultivate them. And as the path grows, all of these qualities build up and they build up until eventually they reach a kind of crescendo, and kind of optimal point when you become an arahant at the very end of the path. This is kind of how these qualities work. So we develop them, and by developing them, they gradually come into fruition and gradually become real in our minds and in our hearts. And this is a very powerful to watch this kind of process happening inside of you, because it's such a beautiful and delightful thing when this actually happens. So when you read the suttas, the word of the Buddha Vajana, you find the idea of contentment is explained in the suttas in a very beautiful way. It is explained in many ways. It is, before I go into the explanation of the gradual training, you find some simple explanations, like in the Dhammapada, for example. In the Dhammapada, you have the very famous saying that contentment is the highest wealth. What is the Pali? Santuti Paramang something, I can't remember. Paramang Boga? No, I cannot sure now. But anyway, contentment is the highest wealth, right? And it's such a, when you are a Buddhist, it's such an obvious thing that why contentment is the highest wealth. Because it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, if you want more, you are not content. If you want more, you haven't got enough. And one of the paradoxes of the world is that you look at people who are really, really wealthy, really well off. they are still not happy. They're still not content. They still need more. They're still competing with the neighbors. It's not that they need more, but it's like a competition. Comes down to status, to the sense of self, to the idea of ego very often. Who has more and who is more successful or whatever. And so it doesn't matter how much wealth you have. If you still want more, it means you're not wealthy enough. But the moment you are content, you are wealthy enough. And because you are wealthy enough, it means that contentment must be the highest wealth. It's a beautiful saying, yeah, and it's kind of very counterintuitive. And if you tell this to ordinary people in the world, they would say, what are you talking about? Contentment is the highest wealth. That's kind of crazy. How is the economy going to grow, right? What's going to happen to the economy if everyone thinks like that? And who cares about the economy? Yes, this is about our private development of the spiritual path. This is far more important than the economy. And anyway, there's always only going to be a small minority of people in the world who are interested in spiritual practice. Yeah, people like you, people like myself, people like in the monasteries around the world who are interested in meditation. It is not going to affect the world economy at all. In fact, it's going to affect the world economy in a good way. Because it is well known that people who are moral, who are content, they have a beneficial effect on the world. So actually, we have a positive impact on the world economy as spiritual practitioners. It's irrelevant, but it's still kind of interesting, right? I don't know if you've heard, this is a bit of a digression, but Ajahn Brahm tells the story. There is a man, he was one of the governors of the Bank of England, right? And he was also a Buddhist. And so I know him a little bit myself, but he was a professor at Reading University in the UK, one of the governors of the Bank of England. And because he was a Buddhist, he actually said that if everyone is moral, if everyone practices the 5 precepts, the Panchasila, it means the economy will grow faster because there is less what they call transaction cost in the economy. The transaction cost are the cost of lawyers, the cost of paperwork, all of these kind of things. Because the lawyers are important because people are cheating too much, people are lying too much, people are stealing too much. And because of that, there are all these extra costs in the economy. So he said that if more people practice the 5 precepts, if more people become real Buddhists, the economy will grow better. That's kind of interesting. It's kind of irrelevant, but it's still interesting how these are kind of hidden benefits of living the spiritual path in this way. So by being contented, by living well, it has all of these kind of benefits. It is the highest kind of wealth according to the Dhammapada. Another nice thing about the idea of contentment that you find in the suttas is that it is very often connected with the idea of seclusion. Seclusion is viveka or paviveka in the Pali language. They both mean seclusion. And contentment and seclusion very, very often go together. And if you think about it, it is very obvious why this must be the case. Because if you are contented, then seclusion becomes easy, because then you can enjoy the peace, you can enjoy the solitude, you can enjoy a meditation retreat like you're having now, yeah, because you are contented. You can be peaceful because you have the right background to be able to be peaceful. If you're not contented, seclusion is terrible because you want to do things, you are restless, you want to move in the world. And so seclusion and contentment are very closely related to each other. So if you want to have success on the path of meditation, if you want to be able to enjoy seclusion more, coming out of your ordinary life, coming to a retreat center, maybe sometimes even staying in a kuti by yourself, if you want to enjoy those things, contentment is absolutely critical because they go together. These are not things that are really divisible. They are part and parcel of the same idea of what matters on the Buddhist spiritual path. So paviveka, santuti, these are related ideas. Another nice idea that you probably have heard of in Buddhism is the idea of the Mahapurisa Vitakka. Mahapurisa Vitakka, the thoughts of a great person. Thoughts of a great person. What are these thoughts? Well, one of them is contentment. Yeah. When you talk about a great person, a Mahapurisa, it usually means someone who has, at the very least, is an Arya, but probably an Arahant. So if you are able to have these kind of thoughts, if you are able to think like this, it means that you are approximating to the Aryas. You're moving in the realm of the Aryas. You are yourself being noble when you think in this way. And what a beautiful thing that is, to think of yourself as a noble person, trying your very best to live in a good way. So see if you can use these ideas of the Mahapurisa Vitaka in your own life. One of them is contentment. Another one, again, is seclusion. Yeah, because seclusion and contentment always go together. Another one is apicchata. Apicchata, itcha is desires. Appa itcha is having few desires. Yeah, very closely related to the idea of contentment. Few desires, contentment, seclusion, all of these things revolve around each other. It is a little bit interesting to consider the difference between santuti and apicchata, because there are slightly different ideas about the idea of contentment or having few desires. And contentment, usually in the suttas, means the idea of of being content with what you have, not desiring more in terms of material things, right? In the material realm, you have enough. Not looking for more in that realm. And specifically for monastics, it means that you are happy with the robes you have, with the alms food you get, with the lodging you have, right? That's kind of the monastic idea. And in lay life, it means that you are satisfied with what you have. You're not striving for more. That's the idea of santuti. Apicchata, fewness of desires, has more to do with the ego, with your sense of self. That you're not desiring for more status. You're not desiring for being known as someone special. I want to be known as a great Buddhist, or I want to be known as a great benefactor. I want to be known as a great person, or whatever. That is the opposite of apicchata. So you are happy with who you are as a person. You don't care what other people think. You don't have to look good in other people's eyes. You're happy just to be yourself and just living your life well, and not worrying too much about others. And of course, so these two sides to the idea of contentment or non-desires are very important aspects, because one is the realm of the five senses, the realm of the five sense world, and the other one is the realm of the ego, the sense of self. And these are like two of the main problems in our existence. If you look at the way the suttas talk about the defilements of the mind, very often it talks about for example, if you look from the point of view of the asavas, the asava, the kind of outflowings of the mind, or whatever you want to call them, there's three asavas: the kamasava, the bhavasava, and the avijnasava. And these are like the main defilements. And of those three, kamasava, the defilement in the five sense world, of the five senses, and the bhavasava, which is the defilement of desire for existence. And desire for existence is like the ego, the sense of self, wanting to exist in a certain way. These are the two main defilements, and they're called asavas. And asavas, one nice way of translating asava is as an outflowing, because the mind goes out into the world, interest in the world, get excited about these things, is restless because of these things, right? And this is why santuti and having few wishes is the exact opposite of these things. It is the mind coming inwards. Instead of moving out into the world, always trying to satisfy itself, it stays within instead. So if you want to overcome the asavas, some of these main problems in life, the best way of doing that is precisely, especially in the beginning, to practice contentment. The Mahapurisa Vitaka, santuti being one of those. So these are powerful qualities, right? Very interesting ideas on the spiritual path. So these are 3 of the Mahapurisa Vitaka, just to kind of complete all those Vitakas. I just mentioned them very briefly. The other ones are the idea of generating energy, virya aramba, the idea of being energetic, not being lazy. The other one is sati, mindfulness, and then you have the idea of having a stilled mind, samadhi or samahita chitta, and then to be wise, panya is the last one. So if you look at those 4, there are 4 of the 5 spiritual faculties, the panch indriya, 4 of the panch indriya is what you see right there. And so that is 4 of the panch indriya. You have the seclusion, you have the fewness of wishes, you have the contentment, and then there is the last one. And the very last one is also very interesting, and that is called nippapancha in the suttas. Papancha is, of course, this idea of always proliferating in the world, always craving, having a sense of self that wants to do things in the world, all the views that we have about the world. This is the idea of papancha. And nippapancha is the opposite of that, where the sense of self calms down, where the cravings about the world calms down, where all the views, the silly views and ideas we have about the world, all of that calms down. And this is like, again, this is the idea of the arahant. Only the Aryas have this to some degree, and only the arahant have this fully. Nippapancha is a very profound expression of the Dhamma and the result of the spiritual path. So you can see here that the idea of santuti, being a Mahapurisa Vitaka in this way, is actually something very profound and very beautiful. It is kind of put together with the Panch Indriya. The Panch Indriya are factors that only the Aryas, only the noble ones, have the Panch Indriya fully. In the suttas, it is said that you become endowed with the Panch Indriya when you become a noble person, an Arya, a Sovan or a Sotapanna. And it is also here put together with nippapancha, nippapancha being this beautiful term that talks about the non-proliferation of the mind that is stilled, the mind that doesn't go anywhere, the mind that has no interest in the world, the mind that doesn't want to satisfy the ego anymore, has no interest in all of that area. So this is why they're called Mahapurisa Vitaka, because they're very special kind of thoughts. So if you are able in your life to also think a little bit like this, the idea of contentment specifically we're talking about now, then well done. You are practicing the path of the noble ones, and what a wonderful thing that is. So that is some of the ways that santuti is talked about in the suttas. But one of the things that is very interesting about the way it is talked about in the suttas, and this is what you find in what is called the gradual training, the Pubba Sikka, that you find everywhere in the suttas, and you find it, for example, in the Chulahatipadopama Sutta. Yeah, the Chulahatipadopama Sutta, the shorter sutta on the footprint of the elephant. And I'm sure many of you will know this sutta because it's very famous in the history of Sri Lanka. Yeah, this is the sutta that Mahinda, when he came to Sri Lanka, that he taught the king of Sri Lanka at that time, 200 years ago, something like that. Yeah, and this is the sutta that converted the king and all the entourage of the king, and they all become Buddhist. And it's a very, very beautiful sutta about the simile of the elephant's footprint, and then the whole Pubbasika, the whole gradual training all the way to arahantship. And one of the things that you find in this sutta is precisely the idea of contentment. Yeah, it is described in the sutta. And the place you find it after Mahinda has explained all the silas, all the idea of right speech and right action. And before he goes on to sense restraint is the Indriya Samvara Sila. Yeah? So before he goes to Indriya Samvara Sila, he talks about Santuti. Yeah? And the way Santuti is described in a very striking way in this particular sutta. And you may recognize it when you hear about it. And the Buddha says, a monk or a monastic, yeah, monk or a nun or whatever, when they are content with alms food to fill their stomach, and and with robes to protect their body. And wherever they travel in the world, they only take these things with them. All you have is the alms bowl. All you have is your alms bowl, alms food, and the robes to protect your body. And you are content with these things. And wherever you go in the world, that is all you take with you. And you are, the Buddha then says, you are just like a bird. You are a bird that has like the wings as its only burden. Wherever the bird flies in the world, all it takes with it are its wings. So it is this idea of simplicity here. So it is not just the idea of being content, when it comes to the monastic life, and maybe also sometimes to lay life as well, depending on how you live your lay life. But it's not just the idea of being content, but it's the idea of being content with little. Just your alms bowl, just your robes. It's such a simple idea. There's nothing to it. That is all you have in the world. And that is all you have, but it's all you want. You don't want anything apart from that. And sometimes it's kind of extraordinary. How is it possible just to want to have robes and an alms bowl? How can you be satisfied just with alms food and robes to protect your body here? It sounds kind of extraordinary here. And for most people in the world, it is very difficult to understand. And you almost have to be a Buddhist, or at least you have to be a profound meditator to get an understanding of how this can possibly be the case. How can this be the case? And one of the things I want to discuss with you and to describe to you is how we can approach this. How is it possible to be content with so little? And even if you have more than just an alms bowl or robes, even if you have more, at least you can be content with that. Whatever it is that you have. How can we approach this ideal? Because it's such a beautiful ideal. And what is very interesting is that you do find monastics in the world, even in the present day, certainly until very recently, who lived like this. All they had was pretty much an alms bowl and robes on the body, and maybe a few other requisites like a needle or something, or maybe some cloth to patch your robes or something like that. And Venerable Metta Vihari, he will know who I'm talking about, because some of these monks, they have existed in Sri Lanka as well, wandering around the island of Sri Lanka, moving around from village to village, never staying very long in one place, and being very, very simple. And there's something very inspiring about that. And the reason why it is inspiring is because not only are they very simple monastics, very, very simple, but they're also very happy here. They are very still. They give very profound Dhamma talks. When you're with them, it's this feeling of being drawn in to an alternative reality, a reality which is Dhamma, a reality which is beautiful. And this combination of simplicity with the idea of very profound spiritual qualities, that combination is extraordinarily powerful. And when you see that, you understand there is something more in this world. There is something in this world that I may not have reached yet, but which is available on the spiritual path. Because if it is possible to be happy, not just happy, more happy, extremely happy, very content, very satisfied, being so wise, when you have so little, it means that there is something in the world which is very interesting, something that I too would like to achieve. Inner happiness, inner stillness, inner understanding, inner wisdom. It points the way to us. The Buddha says just the sight of an arahant, just the sight of a noble person in the world is incredibly valuable, because you see something different. You see a potential in yourself that otherwise is very, very hard to see. And so my point here is that this idea of contentment, of santuti that you find in the suttas, of a monastic just carrying the bowl, just having the robes, it is still in existence in the world in the present day. And if you look at the history of Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is a very interesting place, because in Sri Lanka you have so much beautiful forest, you have such incredible potential for monastics to live the ancient way of the arahants from the Theravada and Therigata. That is still possible in Sri Lanka, one of the few places in the world where this still is possible, because you have preserved some of that forest. I understand that the government is kind of trying to chop down some of those forests, but hopefully you will still have some of them for a while into the future. Yeah. So this is very inspiring. Yeah? And this idea of the simple monastic, living like a bird, yeah, like a bird with the wings as its only burden. It's almost like no burden because the wings are necessary for the bird. In the same way, the robe and the ball are necessary for a monastic. You have to carry these things with you because this is your livelihood. Without that, you're not going to go anywhere at all, and your path is going to be blocked from you because of that. But a beautiful ideal. And so how can we move towards this ideal in our own life? How shall we think about life in such a way that actually it becomes possible to be more content? How can each one of us become more like this bird with the wings as its only burden? There's something very beautiful about the idea of a bird, right? Because a bird is free. A bird takes off, it soars up into the sky, it goes wherever it wants. It is free from the ordinary bounds of ordinary existence. We are kind of human beings, we don't have any wings, so we have to kind of walk around. We're kind of bound, to some extent. The bird kind of soars like that. And the arahant, or the monastics who practice in this way, they have the freedom of the bird, not being bound to a place, not being bound to a home, not being bound to a particular society, but moving freely around, like the bird moving in the sky. This is kind of the beautiful idea here. When you are content, it liberates you, it frees the mind, it enables you to move more freely in our society, also in the forest, whatever it might be. So how can we do this? What are some of the ways of thinking? And one of the kind of most interesting things on the Buddhist path, I think, is one of the things that is very often underestimated, but is very, very important in so many areas of the spiritual life or the monastic life in general. That is the idea of right view. Samma ditthi. Samadhi is so important on the spiritual path. And if you want to be content, one of the most important things that supports contentment itself is actually samadhi, looking at the world in the right way, understanding the world from the point of view of the Buddha. The closer you get to the viewpoint of the Buddha, the more samadhi you have. And once you start to contemplate samadhi, you realize how important it is for almost everything on the path, right? The more strong your samadhi is, the more virtuous you're going to be. The more restrained you're going to be. The more metta you're going to have. The more karuna you're going to have. The more generosity you're going to have. Your mind is always going to be leaning in the right direction. Samadhi is such an incredibly important foundation for the Buddhist path. Even if we spend all our time just contemplating the truth of the Buddha, the way he saw the world, if we contemplate that a lot, gradually our mind changes in that direction and we get more samadhi as a consequence. And one of the things that comes from that is santuti, is contentment. More samadhi, more contentment is a result. Why is that? And one of the reasons is because one of the things that you start to understand about the Buddha's teachings is that the Dhamma and the practice of the Dhamma, this is the meaning of life. This is what life is all about. The Dhamma is a practice that gives you everything that you can hope for in this world. It gives you more joy, it gives you more happiness, it gives you more peace and tranquility in the mind. It gives you more freedom in your relationships and in the world. It gives you more independence in your life. And ultimately, it gives you the highest thing of all, the end of all suffering and the highest happiness. Nibbanang paramang sukhang. Nibbana is the highest happiness, as you find in the Dhammapada. And so it gives you everything. It gives you meaning. It gives you a real goal. We're actually going somewhere. We're heading somewhere. It is not fake. We're not just going round and round, always coming back to the same point. No, the Dhamma has a real goal. We're actually heading somewhere real. And as we are going somewhere real, we are also enjoying all these benefits on the way. It's such a beautiful thing. This is the meaning of life. And yet, when you look at the ordinary life that we live, all the ordinary things that we do, the world of the five senses, the relationships that we have, the work that we do in that world, the status that we have in that world, all the things, the ordinary things in life that are connected to the world, they don't go anywhere. They just go round and round and round. It's always more of the same. This is sometimes difficult to see when you only take one lifetime into account. But when you take into account the idea of rebirth, it becomes incredibly obvious that you're just going round and round and round all the time, never really getting anywhere. There is no purpose to the ordinary life. There is no aim. There is no goal. It is like a roaming around without purpose. And because it is a roaming around without any real purpose, because you're not going anywhere, you are never going to be content. You're never going to be satisfied because it doesn't lead to any real goal, any real purpose. It's just more and more and more of the same. And so once you start to realize this, then your mind gives up your interest in that world. You still do your duties, you still do what you have, but you understand that actually that world is not so interesting because it doesn't have any purpose, it doesn't have any goal. And whatever doesn't have any goal also has no real meaning. The real meaning is only found on the spiritual path. And so once you start to see that, you start to give up a little bit of your interest in the five sense world. The craving starts to die down a little bit. The attachment dies down a little bit. The pursuit of things in that world dies down a little bit. And you become more content because of that. So by understanding the Dhamma in the right way, by understanding that this is where you find real meaning, this is what life is all about, by its very nature, that will lead to contentment, because you're giving up those things that are all to do with discontent. So think about these teachings. Try to understand what they really are about. Try to see them as the very meaning of life itself. And the more you see it like that, the more your mind will incline towards these wonderful teachings called the Dhamma of the Buddha. It's extraordinarily powerful. And then you come down to your seat, and because you sit down, you meditate, you cross your legs, because you don't have that interest in the world anymore, your mind becomes peaceful naturally, because it no longer goes out to all of these things in the world. So this is like the first way of overcoming this problem, of discontent, moving towards more contentment. And as you think about the Dhamma in this way, as you understand that the Dhamma is about the meaning of life, you start to have a lot of gratitude towards the Buddha. The Buddha is the greatest human being in human history by a long, long way. It's this extraordinary person who discovers the meaning of life, who understands the human condition all the way to the bottom. It's kind of extraordinary that we have found this kind of teacher, right? How is that possible? Especially me, I was born in a country in the West, right? There's no Dhamma where I was born. Still, I was able to somehow find the Dhamma. I feel really lucky. How come? Yeah. And the more you reflect on the fact that you have found this extraordinary teacher called the Buddha, who is able to guide us towards the very meaning of life, and who gives us all of these beautiful teachings, not only do you become content, but you start to feel joy. This is what the Buddhanussati is all about. Buddhanussati is about remembering that you have the greatest teacher in human history as your teacher. The teachings that he gave us, the Dhamma, are still available to us. You have the greatest teaching in the world still available to you. And then there are the Aryas in the world, the noble ones, the Arya Sangha, that is still living in the present day. And if you look carefully around you, you will see that these people are still there in our midst. We are so lucky to have these things still available to us. And when you think about these things in the right way, it does give rise to joy. It does give rise to a sense of gladness. And in some ways, living in Sri Lanka, having grown up in Sri Lanka, the idea of the Buddha is going to be quite natural to you. Yeah, you have an understanding of the Buddha that me, coming from the West, I don't have that in the same way here, perhaps. Yeah. So you use that understanding of the Buddha to give rise to more joy and more happiness on the path. And as you do that, as you go further into this contemplation of the Dhamma, the Buddha giving you the meaning of life, the contentment becomes even more deep, because joy always goes with contentment. The more joy you have in your practice, the more content you are going to be. Why? Because joy is meaningful. Joy is something everyone wants. And if you get what you want, you will tend to be content with it. So this is how you start to give rise to contentment. It comes from right view, yeah? The idea that the Dhamma is about the meaning of life, the idea that this is what really matters. All these other pursuits in the world are hollow, they are empty, they don't get you anywhere, they just take you around in circles. Sometimes our life seems like very important, right? When you grow up, when you are a teenager or in your 20s, you go to university, you study really hard and all of these kind of things. And it seems like life has a purpose. The purpose is like to get married and to have children and to have a nice job and then to kind of have success in your life. This seems like a purpose. But as you grow older, you start to understand, actually, there wasn't really any purpose in that, because when you do them, they are still kind of empty. They don't really give any real fulfillment. It doesn't get you where you thought it was going to get you. You thought it was going to be really fulfilling. It turns out it was not. And I think this is one of the reasons why often you find that people who are middle-aged or a little bit older, they come into the Dhamma because they understand that the dreams of the future that they had when they were young, they were false. They were fake dreams. Life never actually comes out in that way. Life is often much more meaningless than we think it is. And that's why, sometimes you see the older people are the ones who come the most to the temples, right? It is always like that, because you have the wisdom of life that helps you in that way. So our job then, as monastics, as Buddhists, is to also tell the young people, right? Listen, yeah, this is our experience of the world. This is what life really is like. Don't waste your life like everyone else, working really hard, doing all of these things, going around in circles, never really getting what you want. Get on with the Dhamma straight away. That is where you find real meaning. Instead of waiting till you get old, do it when you're young. Those are the people who show real wisdom, who are able to understand this at a young age. That is kind of really the critical thing here. And so this is about right view, the idea of seeing the world in the right way here. There is much more to right view. One of the other things which ties very closely in with what I've been talking about now, and this is one of the very famous similes of the sensory world that you find in the Potalya Sutta. I always talk about the Potalya Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 54. And the Potalya Sutta has all these similes about the five sense world. And one of the similes in the Potalya Sutta is the simile of the dog and the bone. Yeah, the simile is about this dog. The dog goes to the butcher shop, and it sits outside the butcher shop trying to look very cute, because if it's a nice dog, maybe it can look cute, and it's waiting for the butcher to throw it a bone. But butchers don't want to waste any meat on the dog, right? So after scraping off all the meat, and there's a little bit of blood left on the bone, it throws the bone out to the dog. But of course, the dog is hungry here. The dog wants to eat meat, and all it gets is a bone smeared with blood. And of course, when the dog chews on that bone smeared with blood, it just gets craving, even more craving. But there is no sustenance, right? Craving because it tastes the blood, it tastes almost like meat, but there's no sustenance there. So the craving gets stronger, but there's no real satisfaction. The five sense world, we are like that dog running to the butcher shop. And then the dog, because it doesn't get any satisfaction in this butcher shop, it runs off to the next butcher shop. Next butcher is just as stingy as the previous one. The dog just gets the bone smeared with blood, gets the taste of meat, but no real sustenance. Then he goes off to the next butcher shop, and on it goes, never really finding any satisfaction in this world. This is the world of the five senses. Then the dog dies. And then when the dog dies, and this is kind of the tragedy of all of this, when the dog dies, it gets reborn. Where does it get reborn? It gets reborn as a dog. Because once you have become a dog, it's very difficult to get out of being a dog. This is one of the dangers of having a lower kind of rebirth. You are trapped in that rebirth. And you become a little puppy. And that little puppy hangs out with its mother. And where does its mother take the puppy? It takes the puppy to the butcher shop. And then the cycle goes on from life to life. One more bone smeared with blood. One bone smeared with blood after the other. Endlessly going on, no end in sight, always craving, never finding any real satisfaction. That is the five sense realm, according to the Buddha. And it sounds terrible. And our job is to try to understand our lives, that they are a little bit like this. The job of each one of us is to make these things real. Is it possible for you to see your own life, a little bit of this running around, never being satisfied, always moving on to things? Especially when you take multiple lives into account. Remember, you have done these things before. Getting married, working really hard at school, getting a job, becoming a pensioner eventually, and then dying, and then again and again and again, never finding satisfaction in this. This is kind of the scary thing about this realm. And so the Buddha says, no, the Dhamma is the path. That is where you find real satisfaction. It happens in meditation practice. It happens when you attain samadhi, when you climb the mountain of samadhi. You get to the top of the mountain and you get the bird's eye view. That is when you understand life. That is when you understand the five sense realm, because you have emerged above the world of the five senses through samadhi. That is where you find real peace, real contentment, when you give up that world and you go to a higher level of bliss, of happiness, of peace, and all of these kind of things. Right view leading to contentment, because you are withdrawing from that world of the five senses, understanding how unsatisfactory it is. So this is how contentment leads you in the right direction, right? Leads you in the right way. And of course, the other thing that I talked about before is the sense of self, the ego, the sense of self, how the sense of self also always wants things in the world, how the sense of self always wants to build itself up, create a status for yourself, make sure that you are well regarded by people around you, that you have all the right personal qualities, that you build up the sense of self inside. And this too, of course, leads to a large degree of discontent in the world, because you're always striving to be somebody. But instead of trying to be somebody, instead of trying to always achieve the unachievable, because regardless of what you achieve in that world of the ego, it will never be enough. It will never be satisfying. It will never be, now I have found the real kind of solution to these things. No, the reality is that instead of doing that, we kind of hold off on those things. We are satisfied with who we are. We're just an ordinary person. If you want to be really satisfied with who you are, it is much more important to have a good heart. If you have a good heart, if you are a kind person, that is the kind of ego you want to have. One of the important things in life, there is always going to be some kind of ego. It's impossible not to have an ego. This is just what comes with the idea of existence. The sense of self is always going to be there. And so what we have to do is to choose a kind of ego that helps in the practice. And the kind of ego, the kind of self that helps in the practice is the feeling that you are a good person. You're living your life well. And that is really all you want, that warm and good feeling inside. I'm living a good life. I'm doing things in the right way. And because of that, I I'm happy with who I am as a human being. Yeah. And that is really the critical thing. And when you have that kind of ego, a peaceful, quiet ego, not shouting to the world, here I am important, look at me, that will never be satisfactory because everyone is shouting, everyone is trying to stand out in the world. How can anyone stand out if everyone is trying to stand out? It is impossible. Instead, you have an inner happiness where you feel good about yourself. And that is the initial kind of ego, the initial kind of sense of self that you have. And this is the kind of sense of self that ultimately leads out of the entire sense of self business. You're using the sense of self in a positive way to lead away from the sense of self. And then you are on the right track. And then you can be content. Then you can be content because you're not trying to achieve things in the world that are unachievable. You sit down, you close your eyes, you don't know, you don't worry about who you are anymore. You don't think about yourself in relation to other beings. You just have a simple satisfaction with your own life and who you are as a person. And that is an aspect of Santuti, or apicchata, that is also very important if you want to use these ideas all the way and take it all the way to awakening. Yeah. So please try to use some of these ideas. Use the idea of right view, understanding where real contentment, real happiness, real meaning is to be found. It is always on the spiritual path. And the more you understand that, the more content you will be. The more you will give up your attraction to the five sense world, the more you will give up the idea of building up an ego, building up a sense of self, and all of these kind of things. And as you do that, you will start to become like the bird with the wings as your only burden. Yeah. And even if you live lay life, even if you have more things than a monastic has, that's okay. You are satisfied with what you have in lay life. Yeah, those things you have, it is okay. And if you lose some of those things, you don't grieve too much. And then you can carry on and you can come on a retreat like this. You can enjoy the good company of your fellow retreatants, your fellow yogis, and some of the monks around as well. And then you can make good progress on this path. Your meditation starts to bite, and then all the joy, all the happiness, all the peace in the world gradually becomes yours. Okay, Rohanta, that is the end of the talk for today. So now you are all very welcome to ask questions or make some comments or to whatever you would like. So please feel free to do so.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bhante, for a wonderful talk. We have about 8, 9 questions on the chat, then you might be able to read it out more clearly, I thought. You can open your chat, right? From your...
Yeah, I should be able to. In the
okay.
Okay. There's nothing in the chat now that I
Yeah,
can see.
I will paste it now.
Okay.
Maybe it's too big.
Aha,
Sorry,
okay.
Bhante, it's not on the chat, but I think you can see this.
Yeah, this is fine. Yeah, this is good. Okay. So this is the first one, is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question here is, Dear Ajahn, what is the importance of watching the mind to a meditator, even when not meditating? How does it help us on the path? Okay, so this question really is about things like the Indriya Sangvara Sila, right? The Indriya Sangvara Sila is often translated as sense restraint in the English language. And the idea is to keep a mind that is balanced. In other words, you don't want to have a mind that is always buffeted or moved or shaken by desires and by aversion or by ill will. If you don't have any restraint in your ordinary life, the mind will always be shaken by desires because you see a beautiful sight, or maybe you meet a person who you don't like. Yeah, there's always some people we find difficult in the world. And when you have these experiences, your mind is always moved very strongly. Sometimes it gets very excited, sometimes it gets very depressed and angry. And what we want to do is to try to avoid that in our life. Because when we have an even mind, that is when the mind is in balance. That is when we focus on Dhamma rather than on the worldly things. And it enables the meditation, enables the whole path to happen, including contentment. Contentment comes in part from this. So watching the mind in daily life means that you watch the mind in such a way to avoid anger, for example. Anger is a very, very destructive force. It is the most important thing to overcome, anger or ill will. So if you are able to watch the mind and you can see that now maybe there is some anger coming, and then you can take an alternative route, you can redirect your mind in a new direction, thinking about things in a new way, then you will enable yourself to avoid those snakes. I call them snakes because they are dangerous, right? And so you avoid the ill will, you avoid the anger snake, and then because you avoid that, your mind becomes even, and you can have metta and karuna instead. Ultimately, it is about developing metta and karuna on the path. So this is the idea of watching the mind, right? If you want to do it in a more advanced way, you can also overcome desires in this way, right? If you see something in the world that you desire very strongly, but you know that it is not appropriate, it is a wrong kind of desire, then you can turn your mind towards the danger of that. You can understand why you should not be doing it and giving up that kind of desire, because you know it will be very destructive for your life if you go down the path of desiring certain things. And so you watch your mind. You are aware of whether your mind is about to desire too much or or become too much ill will. And then by doing that, you can take an alternative route and you can avoid these things. And this is kind of the idea of watching the mind, Indriya Sangvara Sila. It is also called Sati Sampajanya. It's a kind of similar kind of thing here. And then you kind of bringing all of these things together. Yeah. All right, so I hope that helps. Let's go on to the next question. I can only see half the line there, Rahanta.
Oh. Better?
It's the one above. How to practice that line. I can't see the end of the line.
Yeah.
Okay, there you are. Okay. So can you reduce the font a little bit? Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, give me 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let me just see. Yeah. So the question, dear Ajahn, how to practice facts of Buddhism, such as formlessness, emptiness, and selflessness, and non-self in our normal life. Okay. So the idea here, especially emptiness and non-self, these are like almost the same thing. When we talk about emptiness in the suttas, in the Sutta Pitaka, it is basically used in the same way as the idea of non-self. It is we are empty of a self and anything belonging to a self. So these are kind of very similar kind of things. Formlessness, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Formlessness usually refers to very, very high levels of meditation practice. But emptiness and non-self you can use in your ordinary life. And I will give you an example. And this is, to me, is maybe one of the most important ways of using the idea of non-self. And that is to help you to manage things like ill will and anger in your life. How can we always have metta? How can we always have compassion to the people around us? And it's a very challenging thing, right? Because sometimes people seem very bad or very nasty or very difficult or whatever. How can we have a lot of compassion to a very difficult person? And the answer is to remember that the reason why people are difficult, the reason why they're hard to deal with, is not because they want to be bad towards you, because they are, a bad person, because they simply want to annoy you or whatever. The reason is because they have been conditioned this way. Yeah, they have been, because of their past, because of their parents, because of society, because of school, because of their past lives, because of all of these things, they have become conditioned to be the person they are now. And because they are conditioned to be this way, they don't have much choice. They have to be, if you want, a bad person. Yeah, all of these things come together and control their lives. And this is a very important way of understanding the world, and it's what you find in the very famous Anatalakkhana Sutta. Anatalakkhana Sutta is the characteristics of non-self, the second sutta supposedly spoken by the Buddha. And one of the things that he says in there is that when it comes to your sankharas, and sankharas is really the will, it is the intention, is the choices in your life. The Buddha says you cannot say, may my choices be like this, may my choices not be like that. In other words, you cannot choose your choices. You cannot decide to have one choice rather than another one. And what that means is that our choices, our intentions in life, our will in life is determined by all of these facts around us. And all of these facts around us, well, what are they? Well, they are our background, our conditioning, our past lives, all of these kind of things. Our choices are determined by these things. And so if someone is a very difficult person and someone is treating you badly or treating other people badly or doing bad things in their life, it is not because they want to be a bad person. It's because they have no choice. They are a bad person through their conditioning. And this is a result of understanding the non-self teaching of the Buddha in the right way. So if you understand non-self teaching in the right way, if you see somebody who is very difficult and very hard to deal with, have compassion for them. They are trapped in that mind. They are trapped in that view of the world. They are trapped because of their past habits. They are trapped in that personality, and they cannot be any different. They are the one who need compassion. So forget about yourself. Yeah, it is not really about you. Forget about, yes, maybe you are hurt, but so what? The world is painful, right? You have to expect some degree of hurt in the world. The world is painful, so forget about yourself. But look at the other person in a new way. Understand that the other person is trapped in a very, very difficult situation. And because of that, you can have compassion for them. You can give them this understanding of non-self, that they are trapped in this way. Then compassion becomes possible. So in this way, you can use the idea of non-self and the idea of emptiness to have compassion for everyone in the world. Yeah, the gangsters, the people who steal from us, the bad politicians, whatever it is in the world that may be corrupt or bad, you can have that right kind of view about those people. So this is how you use non-self in a very, very powerful way in ordinary life. And I can guarantee you, if you use this idea consistently again and again, after a while, you will not be able to get angry with other people anymore. You will tend to have compassion. You will have compassion everywhere because you understand how trapped we are as human beings by the past, by our habits, etc. Okay, let me stop there because as always, time is quite short. So I'll go on to the next one. So dear Ajahn, what is meant by anchoring the breath to the body in breathing meditation? Please explain. So anchoring the breath to the body, I think what that means is that you observe the breath in a particular place in the body. So for example, if you observe the breath on the nostrils or the upper lip, it's like you are anchoring the breath in that particular place. Or if you observe the breath in the abdomen, in the belly, you can see the abdomen coming and going, then you're anchoring the breath there. But I usually follow the way Ajahn Brahm teaches. And the way Ajahn Brahm teaches mindfulness of breathing is by simply being aware of the breath without anchoring it in the body at all, but simply knowing the breath goes in and the breath goes out. And it doesn't matter where you know that. Forget about where you know it. If you close your eyes, you can know the breath is going in and you can know the breath is going out, and you can know that without any reference to the body as such. You just know the breath is going in and out. And I think, I don't know, to me that is a very easy way of doing breath meditation. If you try too hard to anchor the breath on the tip of the nose, the nas agga, this comes from the Pali commentaries, it's called the nas agga, the tip of the nose. If you try too much to focus there, sometimes it can become too tense. Sometimes it can become too much to start the meditation. Initially, when you start your meditation, you want to be quite relaxed. So you have a more relaxed view, and more kind of, the whole breath is more relaxed than a tiny point. And so because the whole breath is a bit more relaxed in terms of attention and focus, it means it's easier initially in your meditation practice. That is what I recommend. I'm really just following the ideas from Ajahn Brahm, who I take to be my meditation teacher. Of course, I take the Buddha to be my meditation teacher, but also Ajahn Brahm, the way he practices. So that would be my recommendation. Okay, so we go on to the next question here. Dear Ajahn, the Sotanugata Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 491, it is mentioned that you have listened to the Dhamma, recited, examined by mind and comprehended theoretically. You may attain the fruits of the Dhamma in heaven, even though you die unmindfully here. What does the Buddha imply in this sutta? I've heard friends say, according to the sutta, one can attain Nibbana just by listening to the Dhamma. Okay, just hold on 1 second, because when I discuss the suttas, I want to have the sutta in front of me, otherwise I can't discuss it properly. So I will do my job properly as a monk, and I will bring the sutta up. Otherwise, I feel like a bit of a fraud. So let's not have any fraudulent monks. So here we go. So this is 491. All right, 491. Aha, Sotanugata Sutta, followed by ear. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So the thing is that the suttas don't always tell you everything that you need in one sutta. The suttas focus often on specific points. And just because this sutta doesn't say anything about sila, nothing about morality, nothing about sense restraint, the Indriya Samvara sila, it doesn't say anything about anything. It just talks about listening to the Dhamma. And so what you can assume here is that there is much more to this sutta than just listen to the Dhamma. Listen to the Dhamma is one thing, It is one aspect. It is the focus of the sutta. But the implication, of course, is that you also have to be a good person. You can't do lots of evil things. If you do lots of evil things, you get reborn in hell anyway. So there's no way you can do that. So the very idea that you get reborn among the gods, already that implies that you are a good person. You are living well. And I would argue that in addition to that, it is implied here, yeah, that also your mind is going to be very peaceful. Quite likely you have done some meditation practice. You may have achieved samadhi probably at some particular point, yeah? And because of that, all of these things are kind of part of this. The problem with the suttas is that they often focus on one particular area, and you cannot expect to understand the Dhamma by looking at one sutta by itself. Often you have to take into account other suttas to understand the overall framework of how the path works. If you take one sutta in isolation, very often you end up with a very one-sided idea of the Dhamma, especially if it is a fairly short sutta, like this one here, which is it kind of has one specific idea that it wants to talk about. But I would say a lot is implied because you get reborn in the heavenly realm. A lot is implied about having lived very well, having done all the right kind of things. And so meditation also, quite likely, I would say, is implied by the sutta. The sutta says that also, and this is also kind of a little bit uncertain what it means, it says that you go to, you reach visesa, and visesa is translated into English as distinction. Yeah. So what exactly does distinction mean? And a distinction is not always, it's very hard to pin down. It could mean that you just go to some very positive results without really specifying what they are. Maybe it means samadhi. Quite likely it means stream entry or something like that, but it's not specified. So again, we need to be careful how to understand these things, right? As long as it isn't specified, there's a degree of uncertainty as to what is meant by these things. So the basic idea is not to read too much into a single sutta, but to take the suttas overall and get your understanding from a broad understanding of the suttas, then you're going to be on the right track. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next question. When you start meditating, why do you start to relax the body from feet onwards instead of head downwards? It doesn't matter how you relax the body. You can do it in exactly what way you want to do it. One of the ways of doing it is to feel where you have tension in the body, and you can relax those places where you have tension. Yeah, that can be one of the most powerful ways. You don't have to do it this way or that way. And so that is really up to you. What really matters is that you are at ease, that you are relaxed. You want to find a way for yourself where you can be really relaxed and at ease. That is what really matters. How you reach that relaxation is kind of irrelevant. I know that in the Satipatthana Sutta, they talk about contemplating the 31 parts of the body. They start from the top of the head going down to the soles of the feet. I think that's what it says. I can't remember now. I think that's what it says. But that is a different kind of contemplation. That is a contemplation that leads to dispassion towards the body, not having any interest in the body. What we are doing here is different. What we're doing here is really just learning to relax, learning to be at ease, putting the mind into a good state so that meditation becomes possible. That is what is important. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This is my experience. During meditation, I noticed things that were disappearing, like the heaviness of the breath disappeared, and a lighter, more subtle breath had come up. The mind that was very busy with thoughts had disappeared, and a sense of calm had appeared. After some time, the sense of calm disappeared, and I felt my heart rate was up, and once again there was turbulence in the mind. At this point, I focused on the sensation on the body, and once again there was a sense of peace and calm. The turbulence had disappeared. All right, so I suppose, please advise how to progress further. Okay, so what you probably want to do is you want to find some kind of more of an anchor for your meditation. Yeah. Previously, they were talking about the body being an anchor for the breath. But really what you need is you need an anchor for the mind for meditation to work. And that is why we do breath meditation. So if you do feel peaceful and calm, that may be the time to go to the breath and stay with the breath if you can. Yeah, and then ideally, if that happens, you will not get the turbulence coming back again as a consequence. It's very difficult to meditate without an object, because if there is no object, the mind is kind of very free to move wherever it wants, and it's very easy for the mind to be distracted. The Buddha says in the suttas, the reason why we use the breath, one of the main reasons, is because it cuts off the thinking mind. Yeah, vitaka, upacheda, or something like that, I think is the word. Upachindati is the word used in the suttas. So use the breath as the anchor here, and then try gradually, you allow that breath meditation to go deeper. And as it goes deeper, using the breath, then hopefully you will avoid the turbulence again in the future. So try and see how that works out for you. Okay, next question, dear Bhante. How may we recognize and respond to Mara in our meditation practice and the external world? Can you please say something about any different types of samadhi or shades of samadhi, from relaxed, non-discursive to inertia, which seems like sloth and sleepiness sometimes, also non-discursive state of being? Okay, so no, that's fine. So how to respond to Mara in our meditation and the external world? So Mara usually is like the tempter in Buddhism. Yeah? Mara, sometimes we think of Mara as a kind of god, but Mara in the suttas usually is like a psychological thing. Yeah? Mara is the psychology where we get drawn into the world, we get tempted by worldly things, right? And that is really the Mara that we're talking about here. And the way to overcome that temptation by Mara is to remember the downsides of that world, to understand how hollow it is, how it doesn't lead to any real satisfaction. Every time you bind yourself to that world, you're binding yourself to suffering. Do you want to bind yourself to suffering? Do you want to buy into this world every time in the wrong way, that every time it kind of lets you down and destroys your meditation and has a detrimental effect on your spiritual path? Is that what you want to do? So you just have to remember, one of the things that I like to use are the similes in the Potalya Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 54. Read those similes, understand what they mean, listen to someone who explains them really well. I love to explain the similes because I find them very powerful. And you get the kind of a global overview of the five sense world. And that global overview, it is not about specific desires, because specific desires are endless. Much better to have a global overview, because then you deal with all the desires, all the attachments in one go. So look at those similes, and as you adjust your view, you change your view of the world in accordance with these similes, then gradually Mara no longer has the same hold of you as Mara used to have. And gradually you let go of that world. Yeah, so just contemplate these Dhamma teachings, understand the danger of the ordinary world, understand the attraction of the Dhamma, yeah? And as you do that, gradually you'll be heading in the right direction. Let's come to the other one, the different types and shades of samadhi, from relaxed, non-discursive to inertia. All right, so you don't want to have the inertia or sloth and sleepiness samadhi. That's not real. That's called miccha samadhi. It's the wrong samadhi. You want to have the samadhi which has a very clear mind. Yeah, when you are very mindful, you are aware of what is going on. That is what you really want. So avoid the samadhi when mindfulness is weak, where you don't have enough clarity of the mind. The samadhi is where, the kind of samadhi you want is where you feel the mind is clear, the mindfulness is powerful, there is joy in the meditation. Joy is a very powerful sign that you are on the right track, that you're having some kind of samadhi. And that joy very often starts to happen if you're watching the breath. It often comes with the breath. When the breath becomes peaceful, the breath becomes kind of refined, then the joy very often comes up with that breath. And that is a sign that you are on the right track when it comes to samadhi. Joy is there, you're able to stay with the breath easily without having to force your mind because you're enjoying the meditation, and then you allow that meditation to develop into more deeper kinds of samadhi, right? More joy, more happiness, more stillness, stage by stage, more of these two qualities. The two qualities that define samadhi are the degree of happiness and joy you have and the degree of stillness that you have. You can measure all samadhi from these two qualities. The more you have of that, the deeper is your samadhi, all the way to the non-dual states of the jhanas. That is kind of where the samadhi comes to its kind of limit. Yeah? This is kind of the highest level of samadhi, the jhana states, and that is where you kind of come to the very end of the Buddhist path as a consequence. So best of luck with your samadhi practice. Okay, now we come to the last question for today, dear Ajahn. What is the Buddhist perspective on artificial intelligence? For example, sex robots, marriage to robots, children playing with robots. Everything in Buddhism, it really has to do with morality. Yeah, artificial intelligence, many people say it can be very dangerous, that it may be able to have a very detrimental effect on humanity. Maybe, I don't know. I can't really say. I'm no expert on artificial intelligence. But what I can say is that when something is used in a way which is positive, used morally, used with good intentions, yeah, then usually it has a good effect. So we should be very careful when we employ artificial intelligence in our society. We should employ it in a way that is helpful, that it is suitable, that it actually gets us somewhere, that it moves our society forward, that it makes us better human beings. We should be very careful that we do that. We should do it in a moral way. And usually when you do things in a moral way, usually the outcome tends to be good. And that's what I would say. I'm not the kind of person who believes in banning things. Yeah, I don't think that's a good way of thinking about it. Instead, let's do it in a moral kind of way. And then we're going to be on the right track. Yeah. Okay, everyone, Rohanta, that's all I have for today. So,
any questions you want to ask? Any other questions? No. No more questions, Bhante. Thank you so much for all your help.
Yeah, great. Shall we just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha before we go?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. I'll just do a very simple chant that we do in our tradition, and then we can bow to the Buddha together. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Okay, yeah, take care everyone, and see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.